Welcome to the Packer Mentality Podcast, the place for fans who want to stay up to date on all the latest news, analysis, and insights. I'm your host, Patrick Corrigan, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk about the Packers, from Lombardi to LaFleur. You can now find me in more places. Packer Mentality is now on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and on social media in the usual places Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Regardless of where you found me, thank you for being here. We are just a couple days away from the start of the Packers training camp practices. Quarterbacks, rookies, and injured players reported on Friday, with the veterans joining them tomorrow, Tuesday, the 25th. And then, thankfully, we'll have actual football activities to talk about. With that in mind, let's do an early projection of what the 53-man roster could look like and suggest a few players to watch out for. Some of these guys could be fighting for roster spots, fighting for playing time, or they could be expected to make a difference right away for this team. First, we have some injury news and updates. The Packers have placed Rashan Gary, Eric Stokes, and Jeff Cotton on the PUP list, while Grant DuBose and Cameron McDonald were put on the NFI, the non-football injury list. I believe this will lead to Gary and Stokes missing the first few weeks of the season to give them time to get in football shape. This also makes life difficult for the other players mentioned, as all of them are likely to be on the bubble to make the roster, and missing practice is not good if you want the coaches to notice your play. Let's start with some easy position groups on offense. At quarterback, the Packers will likely keep two quarterbacks on the active roster, with Jordan Love taking over as quarterback one and rookie Sean Clifford taking the backup position. I'm keeping Clifford over anyone else, as he was a fifth-round draft pick, and Gutekunst likes keeping his draft picks. So unless Clifford just looks awful during the preseason, he's going to be the guy backing up Love. Last year, the Packers kept just two running backs on the active roster to start the season. It'll probably be the same thing this year, with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon both returning. Offensive line will be all familiar names from last season: David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, Zach Tom, Josh Nijman, Royce Newman, Sean Ryan, and Walker, and Caleb Jones rounding out the final two spots. Sean Ryan is the one guy on this list who could play himself off the roster. He was a third-round pick last season, and he just did not do well at any point during the season, and then got himself suspended for the end of the season for failing a drug test. Tight end is another position that looks to be set, with two rookies coming in. Musgrave, Kraft, DeGuara, and Davis are going to be the guys on the roster, at least in my opinion. And now we get to a position with a few question marks. Wide receiver has returning just three players: Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure. I think all three of those guys will make the roster. Don't have a whole lot of questions there. Jaden Reed was their second-round pick. Dontavian Wicks, I think it was a fifth-round pick. I expect both those guys to make the roster as well. And then you have some undrafted free agents and a seventh-round pick. Grant DuBose was a seventh-round pick, but I listed him earlier. He is going to miss some time during training camp with an injury, which puts him well behind a couple other guys. Malik Heath, undrafted rookie free agent. Bo Melton came over at the end of last season from the Seahawks. Those two guys, if they play well in preseason, could make their case to have the Packers keep one more wide receiver. We'll see. Moving over to the defense. the defensive line is going to see a big infusion of youth. Returning, obviously, we have Kenny Clark, but now we will have Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton probably joining him as the starters, and 2 draft picks, Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks, also making the roster. Inside linebacker is going to return some familiar faces. We have Campbell and Walker as the returning starters. I expect McDuffie and Wilson to be the 2 backups and make the team. Tariq Carpenter will probably make the team as a linebacker, but he's primarily a special teams guy. At the edge rusher group, the status and the timetable for Rashawn Gary is going to have an effect on this group. Since he is going to start training camp on the PUP list, I am going to keep him on the PUP list for the start of the season and have him miss the first 4 games, which is going to allow us to keep the following group. Returning, we have Preston Smith and Egbare, Hollins, and then first-round draft pick Lucas Van Ness, and we have a undrafted rookie, Cox, out of Florida. He has a lot of potential, and if he plays well and keeps his head on straight, he has a pretty good chance to make the roster. I have him making the roster as a bit of a surprise. I am also going to assume Eric Stokes is going to be on the PUP list to start the season and miss the first 4 weeks. So I'm going to keep the following cornerbacks on the roster. Jair Alexander, obviously, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon, rookie cornerback, 7th-round pick, I believe, Valentine, and then Corey Valentine as the 5th cornerback. And finally, we come to the group with the most question marks, safety. Aside from Darnell Savage, who is likely assured a roster spot due to his contract, and rookie Anthony Johnson Jr., who was a draft pick, any of these guys could start or get cut. I'm not sure any of them are worthy of starting, so we're going to have to see how they perform in preseason. I believe the Packers kept 5 safeties last season. Here I am keeping 6. But one of them will be Dallin Levitt because of his work on special teams. So we'll have Darnell Savage, Anthony Johnson Jr., Rudy Ford, Tavarius Moore, and Jonathan Owens joining Dallin Levitt. Rounding out the roster, we have the specialists. We have kicker Anders Carlson, rookie. Pat O'Donnell returns as the punter, and long snapper is Matt Orzech. But that position is also being contested. We'll see how he performs during the preseason. That is going to do it for my roster prediction. Practices do start on Wednesday, just a couple days away. Can't wait to finally have some real news to talk about. I'll see you in a few days with a training camp update. Until then, please be safe, have a great rest of your week, and go Pack Go.